Have you ever stopped and wondered why you went through what you went through? Why God put you in that storm, that chaos, and that pain? Have you ever laid awake at night asking, why me? I want you to hear me today, not just with your ears, but with your heart and soul. You were never a mistake. You were never weak. You were never meant to break. God put you in that battle because He knew something you didn't. He knew you had the strength to survive, not just to survive, but to come out stronger. And here you are, standing, breathing, stronger than before. You were placed in the life of a narcissist, not to be broken, but to be a lesson, to be a mirror, to shake their world in a way they never expected. And let me tell you something. They may never admit it, but you made an impact. You made a difference. And most importantly, you made it out. Love is powerful. It's not just words or gestures. It's action, sacrifice, patience, and commitment to something bigger than yourself. When God placed you in the life of a narcissist, He knew exactly what He was doing. He sent you there as a light in the darkness to show what real love looks like. Not the selfish, controlling kind they tried to create, but love in its purest form. Narcissists have a way of twisting love. They change it to fit their needs, to feed their ego, to keep control. They turn love into something that serves them, something that makes them feel powerful, something that revolves around their wants and needs. But you were different. You didn't love with conditions or expectations. You loved with your whole heart. You gave freely, without keeping score. You loved even when it was hard, even when it felt one-sided. And that confused them. Because in their world, love is a deal, something they earn, manipulate, or use. But your love was real. Your love didn't ask for anything in return. Your love saw past their mask, past the walls they built, past the image they showed the world. You saw them, the real them, not the charming, confident act they put on. You saw the fear, the insecurity, the deep wounds they tried to hide. And instead of running, instead of judging, instead of playing along with their game, you loved them anyway. And that scared them. Because deep down, narcissists don't understand real love. It's foreign to them. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to face things they've spent their whole lives avoiding. It shines a light on the emptiness inside them, the void they try so hard to fill with control and attention. Your love was a mirror, showing them what they didn't want to see. At first, they soaked it up. They loved how you made them feel, how you lifted them, supported them, poured into them. But over time, something changed. Because real love requires honesty. It requires vulnerability. It requires accountability. And that's something a narcissist can't handle. So they rejected it. They pushed it away. They told themselves your love was weak, naive, or something they could take for granted. But deep down, they knew the truth. Because you showed them something they had never seen before. You showed them love that doesn't break, doesn't give up, doesn't disappear when things get hard. And that love changed them, even if they'll never admit it. It made them question things they never questioned before. It made them see themselves in a way they weren't ready to face. It planted a seed, one that may not grow today or tomorrow or even years from now, but a seed that will always be there. Because love, real love, leaves a mark. It stays in their mind, in their soul, in the quiet moments when they're alone. They may try to act like they don't need it, like they don't miss it, like they don't care. But they do. Because once you've been loved, purely, truly, and selflessly, you never forget it. You can never go back to not knowing what that feels like, and that is why you were there. That is why God placed you in their life. Not to fix them, not to change them, not to make them into something they're not, but to show them what love really is. And in doing so, you fulfilled your purpose even when they didn't appreciate it, even when they mistreated you, even when they tried to make you feel like you were nothing. You were never nothing. You were the lesson they didn't know they needed. You were the reminder of something greater than themselves. You were proof that love still exists, even in the most broken places. Control is everything to a narcissist. It's their lifeline, their safety net, the thing that holds together the illusion they've carefully built. They thrive on control because without it, they would have to face their own chaos, the insecurity, the fear, the deep emptiness they've been running from their whole lives. Control gives them a sense of power, superiority, and the belief that they are always one step ahead. But then you came along, and suddenly they faced something they had never encountered before. Someone they couldn't break, someone they couldn't bend, someone who refused to fit into the box they had designed for you. At first, they thought they could mold you like they had molded others. They studied you, analyzed your strengths, pinpointed your weaknesses, and figured out how to manipulate your emotions. They used charm, validation, and affection to pull you in, to make you believe they were everything you had ever wanted. And for a while, you may have believed them. You may have given them the benefit of the doubt, trusted their words, and held on to their promises. But something inside you refused to surrender completely. Because unlike others who had fallen into their web, you had something they didn't expect. You had resilience. You had a strong sense of self. You had a light that could not be dimmed. No matter how much they tried to twist reality, to gaslight you into questioning your own thoughts, to make you believe you were less than you truly were, there was always a part of you that remained untouchable, and that terrified them. Control is their foundation. It's how they function, how they maintain their world. Without it, they are exposed, vulnerable, unable to control the narrative. When they realized they couldn't fully control you, that their usual tactics weren't working, panic set in. So they shifted their approach. Maybe they intensified their manipulation, pushing harder, testing new ways to break you. Maybe they withdrew their affection as punishment, hoping you'd come crawling back. Maybe they lashed out, using guilt, cruelty, or intimidation to regain the upper hand. But no matter what they did, it never fully worked, because you saw through it, even if it took time, even if you had moments of doubt, even if you questioned yourself. There was always something inside you that refused to be owned, refused to be controlled, refused to be just another pawn in their game. And the more they realized this, the more desperate they became. They tried to rewrite your story, to make you believe you were the problem, that you were difficult, ungrateful, too emotional, too sensitive, too much or not enough. But those were just words, just weapons to make you doubt yourself. Because the truth they would never admit, is that they feared you. Not in the way one fears danger, but in the way one fears exposure. You were something they couldn't tame, couldn't possess, couldn't manipulate into submission. And that unsettled them more than anything. They had spent their lives mastering control, learning how to pull people in, make them dependent, and convince them that they were the center of the universe. They had perfected the art of deception, making others believe they were powerful, in charge, and in control of everything. But you shattered that illusion. You proved that not everyone could be controlled. Not everyone could be played. Not everyone could be turned into a reflection of their ego. And so, they faced a choice. Try harder, using more extreme measures to break you, or let you go, knowing deep down they had met their match. Some chose to escalate, to push further, to see how much more they could take from you. But even then, even in your weakest moments, even when you questioned everything, there was still one thing they could never fully take. You had something they lacked. You had authenticity. You had truth. You had the ability to stand in the face of manipulation and say, no, this is not love. This is not respect. This is not who I am. And no amount of control could take that away from you. They may have convinced themselves otherwise. They may have told themselves they won, that they were still in control. But deep down, in the quiet moments when no one was watching, they knew the truth. You were different. You were not like the others. You were not someone who could be easily erased, easily replaced, or easily forgotten. Because when you walk away from a narcissist, when you break free from their control, you win. You leave behind something they can never escape. The realization that they were never as powerful as they believed. And that is something they will never be able to control. Empathy is often mistaken for weakness. People see it as soft, as something that makes you vulnerable to being hurt, manipulated, or taken advantage of. But in reality, empathy is one of the greatest strengths a person can have. It can break cycles, heal wounds, and transform even the most difficult situations. When God placed you in the life of a narcissist, he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that your empathy was not a flaw, but a gift. He knew your ability to feel deeply, to understand others, and to connect beyond the surface would challenge the very foundation of the narcissist's world. Because narcissists don't understand empathy. They don't see the world through the lens of compassion, connection, or genuine care. They see relationships as a means to an end, a way to gain validation, power, or control. They see emotions as tools to be used, as weaknesses to be exploited, as things to be manipulated for their own benefit. But then they met you. For the first time, they encountered someone who didn't play by their rules. Someone who didn't see love as a game. Someone who gave without expecting anything in return. At first, they were drawn to it. Empathy is intoxicating to those who lack it. It's warmth in a cold world, a source of comfort, a space where they feel seen, heard, and understood. And for a moment, they may have believed they could absorb it, take your kindness and use it to fill the emptiness inside. But empathy is not something that can be stolen or possessed. It must be reciprocated. It must be given freely. It requires both people to be equally invested. And that's where the tension began. No matter how much they tried, they could not match your level of empathy. They could mimic it, pretend, wear a mask of kindness and emotional depth, but they could never truly feel it. Over time, that difference became impossible to ignore, so they tried to twist it. They wanted you to believe your empathy was a flaw, that your ability to care deeply was why you were getting hurt. They tried to convince you that kindness was a weakness, that people like you were destined to be used, broken, and left behind. But deep down, they knew the truth. Your empathy was not your weakness, it was your power. Because while they relied on control to feel powerful, you didn't need control to have influence. You didn't need to manipulate, deceive, or take from others to feel whole. Your power came from your ability to uplift, to support, to understand, to connect in a way they never could, and that terrified them. They saw how people were drawn to you, not because you demanded attention, not because you manipulated affection, but because people trusted you, believed in you, felt safe with you. They saw how your empathy built real, deep, unbreakable bonds. And no matter how much they tried, they could never quite replicate that. They could never achieve that same level of connection, because their love always came with conditions, expectations, and hidden motives. So they tried to break you. They wanted you to become cold, to harden your heart, to doubt the very thing that made you who you are. They wanted you to see your kindness as a burden, to shut it down to protect yourself. But even when they hurt you, even when they took everything they could, even when you felt like you had nothing left to give, your empathy remained. Maybe it was bruised. Maybe it was guarded. Maybe it needed time to heal. But it was never gone. And that's what they couldn't understand. That's what they could never take from you. Because empathy is not something that can be stolen. It is not something that can be destroyed by someone else's pain. It only grows stronger in the face of adversity. It becomes even more powerful when it is tested. They may have left you, or you may have left them. But no matter how the story ended, one truth remains. You proved that empathy is not a weakness. You proved that kindness is not a liability. You proved that the ability to feel, to care, and to love selflessly is not something to be ashamed of. It's what makes you unstoppable. Because the world needs more people like you. People who love without an agenda. People who heal others without expecting anything in return. People who stand in the face of cruelty and refuse to become like the very thing that hurt them. That is power. That is strength. And that is something no narcissist can ever take away. A narcissist spends their entire life running from themselves. They create an image, a mask, a carefully crafted version of who they want the world to see. They wear it so well that even they begin to believe it. Every action, every word, every manipulation is designed to reinforce that image, ensuring no one, including themselves, ever sees what lies beneath. But then you came along, and everything changed. You didn't just see the mask, you saw beyond it. You saw them in a way that scared them because they weren't prepared to be seen. They were prepared to be admired, worshipped, and obeyed. They were ready to be the center of your world, the one in control of the narrative. but they were not prepared to be reflected. That's what you became, a mirror. You reflected back who they truly were, not the version they wanted to be, not the story they told themselves, but the raw, unfiltered truth. Every insecurity they buried, every fear they ignored, every wound they pretended didn't exist. Everything surfaced in your presence. At first, they may have seen you as different, intriguing. There was something about you that made them feel alive, seen, even if they didn't fully understand why. Your empathy, your kindness, your love, it was new, refreshing, like something they had been missing without realizing it. But the closer you got, the harder it became to hide. Because when you love someone genuinely, you start to notice things. You see the cracks in the mask, the inconsistencies in their stories, the moments when their confidence and charm slip just enough for the truth to peek through. You recognize the patterns, the way they deflect, the way they blame, the way they avoid responsibility. You feel the weight of their unspoken pain, the depth of the wounds they refuse to acknowledge. They saw themselves in your reactions. They saw their own cruelty and the pain reflected in your eyes. They saw their own emptiness in the way you kept giving, and they kept taking, yet never felt fulfilled. They saw their own brokenness in the way you tried to fix things, the way you held on even when they pushed you away, the way you kept believing in them long after they had stopped believing in themselves. And that truth was unbearable. So they tried to destroy the mirror. They couldn't accept the reflection staring back at them, so they lashed out. Maybe they told you that you were too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding. Maybe they accused you of being the problem, twisting the narrative until you began to doubt yourself. Maybe they withdrew, grew colder, punished you for making them feel something they weren't ready to face. Maybe they tried to hurt you, break you, make you question your own reality, so they wouldn't have to question theirs. Because if they could convince you that you were the problem, they wouldn't have to acknowledge the truth. If they could make you doubt yourself, they could keep pretending they were in control. But deep down, they knew. They knew that you saw them, the parts of themselves they had spent a lifetime avoiding. They knew you weren't fooled by the charm, the grandiosity, the carefully constructed persona they showed the world. They knew that no matter how hard they tried, they could never erase the way you made them feel, the way you made them question, the way you made them think, the way you made them see themselves for what they truly were. And that is something they will never forget, even after you leave, even after they pretend to move on, even after they convince themselves that you were just another person who didn't understand them, who wasn't enough, who didn't deserve them. There will always be a part of them that remembers. Because once you have been truly seen, you can never go back to being blind. Once you have been forced to confront yourself, no amount of denial can fully erase what you know deep down to be true. They may find someone else, someone who doesn't reflect them the way you did, someone who plays along, believes the illusion, doesn't ask the hard questions. But even then, the reflection remains. It was never just about you. It was about them. No matter where they go or who they surround themselves with, they will always carry the truth you revealed. That is why you were there. Not to change them, fix them, or save them, but to be the mirror that forced them to see. You were the one thing they could not escape, the reminder that no matter how much they try to hide, the truth will always rise to the surface. Power is not about control, dominance, or manipulation. It's not about making others bend to your will. True power is knowing who you are, standing firm in your truth, and refusing to let anyone redefine you. And that is exactly what you did. A narcissist thrives on taking power from others. They do not build their own strength. They drain it from those around them. They steal confidence, self-worth, joy, and peace, twisting it into something they can use for their own benefit. That is how they survive, by making others doubt themselves, question their reality, and feel weak, unworthy, and confused. When you first entered their world, you may not have realized what was happening. It never starts with destruction. It starts with admiration, attention, and an intoxicating kind of love that makes you feel seen, chosen, special. They build you up, making you believe they see you like no one else ever has. For a time, It feels powerful. It feels like you found something extraordinary. Like you were standing in a light so bright that nothing could ever dim it. But then slowly, the shift begins. The compliments turn into critiques. The admiration turns into control. The connection that once felt so pure begins to feel like a trap. The power you thought you had, the strength you once carried so effortlessly, starts to fade. You find yourself explaining things you never should have to explain. Apologizing for things you never should have to apologize for. Defending yourself against accusations that have no basis in reality. You question your own memory, your own feelings, your own worth. You shrink yourself to avoid conflict. You silence your voice to keep the peace. You become someone you no longer recognize. All in the name of love. And that is exactly what they wanted. Because the moment you start doubting yourself, the moment you second-guess your instincts, the moment you look to them for validation instead of trusting your own inner voice, that is the moment they win. That is the moment they take your power. But here is where your story is different. Because even though they tried, even though they worked tirelessly to strip you of your strength, they never truly succeeded. Deep down, a part of you still knew. A part of you still remembered who you were before they made you doubt yourself. A part of you still recognized that something was not right. And that part of you, the part they could never reach, is what saved you. Maybe it started as a whisper, a quiet voice in the back of your mind telling you this was not love. Maybe it was a feeling, an unease you couldn't explain, a sense that something inside you was screaming for you to wake up. Maybe it was a moment, one undeniable moment where the illusion cracked just enough for you to see the truth. And when that moment came, everything changed. You started to reclaim yourself. At first, it may have been subtle. Small acts of defiance, tiny reminders that you still had a voice. You stopped apologizing for things that weren't your fault. You started asking questions instead of blindly accepting their version of reality. You found the courage to say no, even when they made you feel like you had no choice. And with every step you took, they felt it. They felt the power shifting. They saw the light returning to your eyes. They sensed that the person they had worked so hard to break was no longer under their control. And that worried them. Because a narcissist only thrives when they are in control. The moment you start thinking for yourself, recognizing your worth, and refusing to feed their need for dominance, their power begins to crumble. So they fought harder. They tried to pull you back in. Maybe they used guilt, trying to make you feel selfish for reclaiming your happiness. Maybe they used anger, punishing you for daring to stand up for yourself. Maybe they used love, promising things could go back to the way they were in the beginning, that they could be the person they once pretended to be. But it was too late, because you had already woken up. You had already seen the truth. And once you see the truth, you can never go back to the illusion. So you walked away. Or maybe they discarded you, realizing they could no longer manipulate you the way they once did. Either way, the outcome was the same. You were free. But freedom is not just about leaving. It's not just about escaping the situation. True freedom is reclaiming every piece of yourself they tried to steal. It's refusing to let their words define you. It's refusing to let their actions shape your future. It's refusing to let the pain they cause dictate the way you see yourself. Because you are not weak. You are not broken. You are not unworthy of love. You are not too much, and you are not enough. You are not the version of yourself they tried to create. You are powerful. You are strong. You are everything they tried to convince you that you weren't. And that is why they feared losing you. That is why they worked so hard to keep you under their control, because they saw your power before you did. They recognized your strength before you realized it yourself. And they knew that the moment you took that power back, they would lose theirs. And they were right. Because now they no longer have access to you. They no longer have the ability to dictate how you feel or how you live your life. They can no longer use you as their source of validation, as their emotional supply, as their tool for control. Because you took your power back. And that is something they will never be able to steal again. There comes a moment in every survivor's journey when they realize they deserve more. It doesn't always happen in an instant. Sometimes it comes slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. Soft, steady, undeniable. Other times it strikes like lightning. Sudden, electrifying. A moment of clarity so powerful, it shakes the very foundation of everything you once believed. Either way, the realization is the same. You are worth more than what you endured. A narcissist does not choose their victims at random. They seek out those with light, with love, with something special inside them, because they need that energy to sustain themselves. They do not create their own joy, so they take it from others. They do not build their own self-worth, so they chip away at someone else's. They do not know how to love in a way that is real, so they take advantage of those who do. And that is how they found you. You were kind, you were giving. You saw the best in people, even when they did not deserve it. You loved deeply, selflessly, wholeheartedly, and they saw that as an opportunity. At first, they may have worshipped you for it. They made you feel special, like you were different from everyone else, like they had been waiting for someone like you their entire life. They made you believe that your love could change them, heal them, make them whole. They placed you on a pedestal so high that you thought you had finally found something real, something rare, something worth holding on to. But that pedestal was never meant to last, because narcissists do not love people for who they are. They love them for what they can provide. And once the chase is over, once they know they have you, the illusion begins to fade. The very things they once praised you for, your kindness, your empathy, your unwavering loyalty, suddenly became weapons they used against you. You were too sensitive. You cared too much. You expected too much. They made you feel like your love was a burden, like your emotions were a flaw, like the very essence of who you were was something that needed to change. So you started to shrink, you started to adjust, you started to walk on eggshells, trying to be what they wanted, trying to fit into the impossible mold they had created for you. You silenced your needs, your voice, your pain, but no matter how much you gave, it was never enough. No matter how much you sacrificed, they always wanted more. And the more you tried to prove your worth to them, the more they convinced you that you had none. That is the cycle. That is the trap. And for a time, you may have believed it. You may have believed that love was something you had to earn, that your value depended on their approval, that if you could just be better, stronger, less emotional, then maybe, just maybe, they would finally love you the way you deserve to be loved. But that was the lie. And at some point, whether through exhaustion, heartbreak, or a moment of undeniable clarity, you saw the truth. You realized that love should not require suffering. You realized that you were never the problem, that it was never your job to fix someone who was never willing to change, that you were not placed in their life to be their emotional punching bag, that your love is not something to be taken advantage of, manipulated, or used as leverage in a game you never agreed to play. And that realization, that is the moment you truly became free. And once you saw the truth, everything changed. The moment you learned your worth, you became unstoppable. The moment you stopped seeking validation from those who never truly valued you, you stepped into a power they could no longer control. The moment you chose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect, you shattered the foundation of the cycle they tried to trap you in. But the journey isn't easy. Learning your worth after being conditioned to believe you have none is like rebuilding a house after a storm. There are days when you question yourself, days when old wounds ache, days when their voice still lingers in the back of your mind. But the difference is, now you know the truth. Now you recognize that their inability to love you was never a reflection of your value. Now you understand that someone else's mistreatment doesn't make you unworthy, it makes them undeserving of you. Now you refuse to settle for bare minimum affection, for conditional love, for relationships that drain you instead of filling you. And they know that. They know they no longer have the power to define your happiness, your self-esteem, or your sense of identity. Because now, you belong to yourself. You no longer seek love in places that require you to abandon yourself in order to receive it. You no longer wait for someone else to tell you that you are enough. You no longer lower your standards just to keep someone in your life who was never meant to stay. You are no longer the person who needed their validation. You have outgrown them. Outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated less than you deserve. Outgrown the belief that love should come at the cost of your own well-being. You have stepped into a new version of yourself, one that is whole, unshakable, and worthy beyond measure. And that is something no narcissist can ever take away. A test doesn't always come with a warning. It doesn't arrive with clear instructions or a predictable outcome. It sneaks up on you, disguised as love, as fate, as something meant to be. It doesn't introduce itself as a lesson. It feels like a story, like a connection, like something placed in your life for a reason. And maybe it was, but not for the reason you once thought. This was a test. Not of your strength. You always had that. Not of your intelligence. You always had the ability to see the truth. Not of your capacity to love. You have always loved deeply, fearlessly, with everything you had. This was a test of your ability to recognize when love was not love. A test of your ability to hold on to yourself when someone tried to make you forget who you were. A test of your ability to walk away when staying meant losing yourself. A narcissist doesn't just appear in your life by accident. They arrive like a storm, sudden, overwhelming, pulling you into their world with a force that feels inescapable. At first, they seem like everything you ever wanted. They say all the right words. They make you feel seen in ways that seem almost too good to be true. And that's because it is. What you thought was love was actually a test. A test of whether you would recognize the difference between real love and conditional love. Between passion and control. Between genuine connection and manipulation. A test of whether you would let someone else dictate your worth, or whether you would hold on to it, no matter how hard they tried to take it from you. At first, you didn't realize what was happening. That's how these tests work. They don't start as suffering. They start as something beautiful, something intoxicating, something that makes you believe you found something rare. And for a while, you felt like you were winning. Like you had found something others never would. But then, slowly, the real test began. When the person who once made you feel like the most important thing in their world suddenly made you feel like you were nothing. And this is where many people fail the test. They stay. They try to fix it. They convince themselves that if they just love harder, try harder, hold on a little longer, things will go back to the way they were in the beginning. They tell themselves it's just a rough patch, that the good times were real, that the person they fell in love with is still there, just buried beneath excuses, pain, or struggles. But the truth is, the person they fell in love with never existed. That was part of the test, to see if you would recognize that real love doesn't disappear like that. Real love does not require suffering. It does not make you question your worth. It does not leave you feeling empty, unseen, or unworthy. You were tested in ways you never imagined. You were broken down, made to question everything you knew about love, relationships, and even yourself. You were made to believe things that were never true, to carry burdens that were never yours, to fight battles that should never have existed. But here's the thing about tests. They are meant to be passed. And you did. Because at some point, whether slowly or all at once, you saw the truth. You saw that this was never about love. It was about control. You saw that this was never about your flaws. It was about their need to break you so they could feel whole. You saw that the person you had been fighting for was never fighting for you. And when you saw that, you did something not everyone has the strength to do. You chose yourself. Maybe it didn't happen right away. Maybe it took time, pain, countless moments of doubt. Maybe you left and went back because that was part of the test too, to see if you would keep choosing someone who refused to choose you. But in the end, you walked away. Or maybe they left you believing they had won, believing they had broken you beyond repair. But what they didn't realize was that leaving you was the greatest gift they could have ever given you. Because now you are free. Free from the cycle of proving yourself to someone who was never worthy of you. free from pouring your energy into something that was never meant to be whole. Free from searching for love in a place that only ever offered pain. You passed the test. You learned what you needed to learn. You saw what you needed to see. You felt what you needed to feel. And now, you are no longer the person you were before. You are stronger, wiser, more aware of what love is, and more importantly, what it is not. More protective of your heart, your energy, your spirit. More unwilling to accept anything less than what you deserve. You may not have seen it at the time, but this was always a test. A test designed to wake you up, to show you what you couldn't see before, to lead you to something greater than what you were willing to settle for. And now, because you passed, you will never again fall for the illusion. Never again accept love that comes with conditions. Never again give your heart to someone who does not know how to hold it. The person who once had power over you has no power anymore. The words that once controlled you, the doubts that once consumed you, the pain that once held you hostage, none of it has a hold on you now. Because you see it for what it is. Because you are free. Because you passed the test. Life has a way of testing you in ways you never expected. It doesn't always come in the form of a challenge you recognize. It comes disguised as love, as fate, as something meant to be. You don't realize it's a test at first, because it feels like a gift, like something special, like something rare. But not everything that shines is gold, and not everything that feels like love is love. You walked into this believing in something real. You believed in the connection, in the promises, in the future that was painted for you. You gave your heart, your time, your energy. You gave the best parts of yourself, because that's who you are. Someone who loves deeply, who cares genuinely, who believes in the good in people. And for a while, it felt like that love was being reciprocated. But deep down, something doesn't feel right. Love shouldn't feel this way. Love shouldn't make you question yourself, feel like you're always walking on eggshells, or wonder if you're good enough. The test wasn't just about them. It was about you. It was about whether you'd listen to the voice inside telling you that you deserve better. It was about recognizing that this wasn't love, but a lesson. It wasn't just a test of endurance, though it may have felt like that. It wasn't about how much you could take, how long you could hold on. No, this was a test of something far greater. A test of whether you would recognize your own worth in the face of someone who tried to convince you that you had none. A test of whether you would continue to pour love into someone who only knew how to take. A test of whether you would lose yourself trying to save someone who never intended to be saved. At first, you may not have realized what was happening. They don't start with obvious signs, with red flags you can't ignore. They start with small things. A backhanded comment here, a dismissive look there, a moment where you feel unseen, unheard, unappreciated, and you brush it off. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're overthinking, that you just need to be more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. But deep down, something doesn't feel right. It was about having the strength to walk away, even when every part of you wanted to stay. Letting go wasn't easy. It never is. They made you believe in their potential, in the what if and a version of them that only appeared when they wanted something from you. You held on hoping things would last, hoping they would change, hoping that if you loved them enough, they'd finally see your worth. But that was the test. To see if you would keep chasing someone who was running the opposite direction. To see if you would keep giving to someone who only knew how to take. To see if you would abandon yourself in the name of love. Then something shifted. Maybe it was something they said, something they did. Or maybe it was just a moment of clarity, a realization that hit you hard and couldn't be ignored. Maybe it was exhaustion from carrying the weight of the relationship on your own. Or maybe it was realizing that you'd lost yourself somewhere along the way. Whatever it was the moment you passed the test. You saw the truth. You saw that this was never love. Real love doesn't require you to prove your worth. Real love doesn't leave you drained, empty, or questioning yourself. Real love doesn't come with conditions, manipulation, or a constant battle to feel enough. You realized that walking away wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of strength. Letting go wasn't losing, it was winning. Choosing yourself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. They may have thought they broke you, but they didn't. They may have thought they won, but they didn't. Because the moment you chose yourself, you became something they never expected. You became free. That's why you passed the test. You walked away with something far greater than what you lost. You walked away with wisdom, strength, and a deeper understanding of who you are and what you deserve. You walked away knowing you would never settle for less again. You didn't just survive this test, you conquered it. You were never meant to shrink yourself to fit someone else's version of who you should be, or to quiet your voice just to make others comfortable. For a while, though, you did. For a while, you allowed yourself to be confined within a reality that was never yours to begin with. You played by their rules, danced to their rhythm, and lived in the world they created for you, not because you were weak, but because you loved, because you believed, because you saw something in them they never saw in themselves. A narcissist doesn't want a partner. They want a possession. They don't seek love. They seek control. They don't want to build a life with you. They want to mold you into someone who serves them, feeds their ego, and never threatens their false sense of superiority. That's why they sought you out, because you had something real, something strong, something they could never create on their own. At first, they admired it. They marveled at your kindness, your depth, your ability to love in ways they never could. They saw how you carried yourself, how you lifted others up, and how you brought warmth into every space you entered. For a moment, they wanted to be close to that light. They wanted to claim it, make it their own. But the problem with light is that it exposes darkness. It reveals what's hidden. Instead of cherishing the light within you, they sought to dim it. Instead of rising to meet your energy, they tried to pull you down to theirs. Instead of letting you shine, they convinced you that you were nothing without them. They made you question yourself, second-guess your worth, and believe that the very things that made you special were weaknesses or flaws. They chipped away at your confidence, joy, and identity until you no longer recognized the person in the mirror. And for a time, they succeeded. They made you doubt your power, forget your strength, and believe that you needed them. They made you feel like your world would fall apart if they left. But what they didn't realize is that you were never truly broken. You were never lost. You were never defeated. Deep down, beneath all the lies, manipulation, and the wounds they caused, you were still there. You were waiting for the moment when the illusion would finally crumble, for when the truth would become so loud you couldn't ignore it anymore, for when you would finally see yourself once again, not through their eyes, but through your own. When that moment arrived, everything changed. Once you remembered who you really were, there was no going back. Once you saw the truth, you couldn't unsee it. Once you realized your worth, nothing they could do would ever make you forget it. That was the moment you became unstoppable. You no longer need approval from people who don't value you. You are unstoppable because you felt what it's like to be trapped, and you'll never allow yourself to be caged again. You are unstoppable because you faced the storm and come out of it stronger than ever. You are unstoppable because you now know that no one, not a narcissist, not a manipulator, no one holds power over you anymore. And they know it too. They know that their words no longer control you. They know that their absence no longer has a hold on you. It's something you welcome. You've risen from the ashes they tried to bury you in. You've rebuilt yourself from the fragments they tried to break. You've become someone they never wanted you to be. And that's why you are unstoppable. You've taken everything they threw at you, every wound, every insult, every moment of doubt, and turned it into fuel. You've transformed your pain into power, your heartbreak into healing, and your suffering into strength. They can no longer do anything to you. They can't take anything from you. They can't pull you back into the cycle because you've outgrown it. You've seen the truth. You've reclaimed your life. You no longer live in fear. You're no longer bound by their perception of you. You don't need their apology, their closure, or for them to change. You've given yourself everything they could not. And now, you move forward with clarity, peace, and a strength that cannot be shaken. You are unstoppable, not because of them, but in spite of them. Not because they built you up, but because they tried to break you down and failed. Not because they gave you strength, but because they pushed you to find it within yourself. And that is the greatest victory of all. There was a time when they believed they controlled you. Their words shaped your reality. Their approval felt like the very air you breathed. Their love, or what you believed was love, was something you clung to, as though it determined your worth. They convinced you that their presence in your life was a privilege, that you were lucky to have their attention, that without them, you would be lost. But something changed. Maybe it was one defining moment when everything became crystal clear. Maybe it was the exhaustion of realizing that no matter how much you gave, no matter how hard you tried, it would never be enough for them. Maybe it was the pain of losing yourself that became greater than the fear of losing them. That was your turning point. That was the moment everything shifted. Once you saw the truth, there was no turning back. Once you recognized that their love was conditional, their care was transactional, and their affection was a tool to control you, you couldn't stay blind to the reality anymore. The chains they placed on you were never locked. They only made you believe you couldn't break free. The moment you saw the truth, the moment you chose yourself, the moment you walked away, that's when they lost their power. That's when you became unstoppable. They built their power on the belief that you needed them. They thought you were dependent on their validation, that they could manipulate your emotions like a puppet. They underestimated you. They didn't realize that every time they tried to push you down, you were learning how to stand taller. They didn't realize that every insult, every dismissal, every cruel game they played was only sharpening your awareness, preparing you for the day when you would no longer be under their control. And when that day came, they felt it. They saw the change in your eyes, the way you no longer reacted as you used to, the way their words no longer hurt you like before. They sensed the strength you were reclaiming, the power you found within yourself, and the freedom you were stepping into. And it terrified them. Because they knew, deep down, that once you truly saw them for who they were, once you understood that you never needed them in the first place, they had lost all control over you. You stopped overextending yourself for someone who never met you halfway. You stopped defending yourself against accusations designed to break you. And in doing so, you became untouchable. The things that used to hurt you no longer carried weight. The mind games that once made you question your reality no longer confused you. The fears that once kept you trapped in cycles of self-doubt were replaced with an unshakable certainty that you are more than enough, just as you are. You stand tall, rooted in the truth of who you are, unapologetic in your existence and unafraid of what comes next. They tried to silence you, but they only made your voice stronger. They tried to make you doubt yourself, but they only helped you discover the power of trusting your own intuition. Now they watch from a distance, unable to reach you in the same way they once did. Every tear, every heartbreak, every painful moment has become fuel for your transformation. You've reclaimed your mind, your peace, your confidence, and your joy. You believed in the good in people. You wanted to see the best in them, even when they gave you every reason not to. You stayed, you fought, you sacrificed. One day, you saw it all. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the endless cycle of highs and lows meant to keep you hooked. You saw that they never truly loved you. They loved the control they had over you. They loved what you gave them, not who you were. They loved the power, not the person. That was the moment they lost. This time you walked away and never looked back. You chose yourself over their toxic love. You didn't let the fear of being alone pull you back into their web, because you realized that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel lonely. You understood that freedom is worth more than any relationship built on pain, and that real love doesn't require sacrificing your peace, joy, or sense of self. They felt it, the shift, the change, the loss of control. The cycle that once felt impossible to escape has been shattered, and you are walking a path they can no longer follow. They will try. They will send messages hoping to reignite the old version of you. They will play the victim, hoping to pull you back into the chaos. They will make promises, hoping you'll forget all the times they broke them before. But you won't fall for it. You have outgrown them. You have healed. You've built something so strong within yourself that nothing they do can shake it anymore. You no longer live for their approval. You no longer crave their love. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself to someone who was never capable of truly seeing you. You have become someone they never wanted you to be, free. And that freedom is what makes you unstoppable. They no longer have power over your emotions. They no longer have access to your mind. Now you move forward, not with bitterness or regret, but with clarity, power, and a strength that can never be taken from you again. You are no longer the person who tolerated their games, excused their behavior, or stayed in a place that dimmed your light. You are something far greater. You weren't meant to suffer. You were meant to rise. And you did. You made it. Now it's time to walk into the future God has prepared for you, with your head high and your spirit unshaken. You are a survivor. You are a warrior. And you are free.